Arjun Malhotra, the quiet Indian security guard, and Eleanor Whitmore, the glamorous Beverly Hills billionaire, lived worlds apart. Yet their secret romance would ignite a scandal so dangerous that it ended in bloodshed. Arjun Malhotra stood at the tall iron gates of the Whitmore estate, his eyes scanning the quiet Beverly Hills street. The mansion behind him gleamed like a monument to wealth, its marble walls and manicured gardens unlike anything he had known growing up in Delhi. He was one of several guards hired to ensure nothing disturbed the life of Eleanor Whitmore, a billionaire who lived behind the layers of cameras, alarms, and armed security. For Arjun, the job was meant to be temporary, a stepping stone while he figured out a future in America. But as months passed, it became his entire world. Every day followed the same rhythm. He clocked in, checked the perimeters, watched delivery vans roll up the driveway, and greeted guests who arrived in polished cars. His uniform was neat, his movements precise, his presence meant to be professional but unnoticeable. In truth, he often felt invisible. Nobody paid much attention to the man at the gate, and that suited him well enough. Yet, deep inside, there was a gnawing feeling that his life had drifted far from the dreams he once held. From his post, he would sometimes catch glimpses of Eleanor stepping out of her luxury vehicles, draped in designer gowns and jewels. She carried herself with grace, her every movement reflecting power and control. Though she was distant, Arjun couldn't help but watch, silently fascinated by the life that unfolded beyond his reach. To him, she was untouchable, a figure who existed in a world completely separate from his own. But nights were different. When the sun dipped and silence cloaked the estate, Arjun would linger by the gates, staring at the mansion's glowing windows. He wondered what it must be like to live inside, surrounded by beauty and comfort. He never imagined that his role as a silent watcher would draw him closer to Eleanor than he ever dared to dream. It began on an ordinary evening when Eleanor returned from one of her charity galas. The driveway lit up with the headlights of her sleek black limousine, and Arjun stepped forward to open the gate. As she exited the car, her eyes briefly met his. Instead of walking past as usual, she paused, offering a polite nod and a faint smile. For Arjun, that fleeting moment lingered in his mind long after she disappeared into the mansion. It was the first time she had truly seen him. Days later, another encounter followed. Eleanor stepped onto the balcony, glass of wine in hand, and noticed Arjun patrolling near the garden. She called out to him casually, asking about the weather, her voice calm and curious. It was a simple exchange, but for Arjun, it shattered the invisible barrier that had separated their worlds. From then on, their brief conversations became more frequent. She asked about his background, his family in India, and his life in America. He answered cautiously at first, unsure why someone like her would care, but her genuine interest soon eased his hesitation. Weeks turned into months, and what started as polite exchanges grew into private conversations under the quiet night sky. Eleanor spoke of her loneliness, of the emptiness that lingered even with all her wealth and status. Arjun, who had spent years feeling overlooked and insignificant, found comfort in her openness. She offered him warmth and attention, something he had never expected to find in this place of luxury. Their connection deepened in secrecy. Behind the iron gates and surveillance cameras, they created a hidden world of their own. To the outside, Arjun was just a guard doing his job. But behind closed doors, he had become something far more, an anchor to a woman who had everything yet felt nothing. Their hidden bond grew stronger, but with it came a weight of secrecy that pressed heavily on both of them. Eleanor lived in a world where appearances mattered more than truth. Every move she made was watched by business partners, society elites, and even her own relatives, all eager to find a weakness in her carefully crafted image. A relationship with a man like Arjun, a security guard with no wealth or influence, was something she could never allow to be exposed. Arjun understood the risks, but struggled to balance the two sides of his existence. During the day, he stood silently in uniform, faceless and unnoticed, guarding the gates of her mansion. At night, he was welcomed into Eleanor's private world, sitting in her dimly lit study or walking with her through the gardens when the estate was quiet. He felt torn between duty and desire, knowing that at any moment their secret could unravel. Rumors began to surface among the staff. Eleanor's sudden warmth toward her security guard did not go entirely unnoticed. Whispers traveled quickly in a household where gossip was currency. Arjun tried to dismiss the tension, but the suspicious glances and subtle remarks made him uneasy. Still, the allure of Eleanor's attention outweighed his fear. She had given him a sense of belonging he had never experienced, and he clung to it desperately. Yet, beneath the tenderness, a shadow of danger grew. Eleanor's family, already wary of anyone who might threaten their inheritance, became increasingly suspicious of her late-night habits. Business rivals, too, kept close watch, eager to exploit any scandal. Arjun and Eleanor continued their affair, but every stolen moment carried the risk of exposure. What began as an intoxicating romance was slowly turning into a dangerous game, one they could not control. The illusion of perfection began to crumble as subtle cracks appeared in the life Eleanor had worked so hard to maintain. Her family, long accustomed to her polished public image, started noticing changes in her routine. She became more secretive, retreating earlier from social gatherings and spending long hours alone in her mansion. To outsiders, these shifts seemed minor, but to those closest to her, they were alarming. Her relatives, especially those with an eye on her vast fortune, began whispering that she was hiding something. Arjun, once content with existing in the shadows, began to feel the weight of the secrecy pressing down on him. The stolen hours with Eleanor filled him with both joy and frustration. Each night, he shared with her deepened his desire for more, a life where they didn't have to hide, where he could openly claim the woman who had chosen him over a world of wealth and privilege. But reality constantly reminded him of his place. By day, he was nothing more than an employee in uniform, expected to fade into the background while others in Eleanor's circle carried themselves like equals. Eleanor reassured him with promises of a future, painting vivid pictures of a life far away from Beverly Hills, where money and appearances would no longer control them. Her words gave Arjun hope, but they also stirred doubt. Could she truly abandon everything she had built for him? Or was he merely a distraction from her loneliness, a secret she could never afford to reveal? The more their romance grew, the more it became entangled in tension. The walls of secrecy were closing in, and what once felt like an exhilarating escape was beginning to resemble a trap. Their private paradise was fragile, and every day brought it closer to breaking. Arjun had grown used to the delicate balance of their relationship, but that balance shattered the evening he stumbled upon documents in Eleanor's private study. He hadn't meant to find them. He was tidying the space while she was away, trying to be helpful, when a folder slid open on the desk. Inside were contracts and emails discussing changes in security personnel. His own name appeared on a list, highlighted with a note about replacing him. Worse still, the correspondence implied that Eleanor intended to distance herself from him entirely, citing the risks of inappropriate attachment. The discovery struck him like a physical blow. For months, he had believed her whispered promises, clung to the idea that she saw him as more than just a guard. Now it appeared he had been mistaken. Anger burned inside him, fueled by humiliation and heartbreak. He told himself there had to be another explanation, but the words on the page were clear. To Eleanor, he was expendable, a secret that had become too dangerous to keep. In the days that followed, Arjun's behavior changed. He grew restless, unable to focus on his duties, haunted by the possibility that everything between them had been a lie. When Eleanor smiled at him or reached for his hand, he questioned her sincerity. Had every moment of intimacy been calculated? Had she ever truly cared for him? Or was he simply filling the silence of her loneliness until she grew tired of the game? The betrayal festered, reshaping the way he looked at her, at himself. The mansion, once a place of enchantment, now felt like a prison filled with deceit. Arjun's love, once tender and hopeful, began to twist into something darker. The dream of a shared future had died, leaving only resentment in its place. The night it happened was calm, the kind of evening when the estate seemed untouched by the chaos of the outside world. The gardens were lit faintly by hidden lamps, the fountains whispered softly, and the air carried the sweet fragrance of jasmine. Yet inside the mansion, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Arjun had confronted Eleanor about the documents he had found, his emotions fraying after days of silence and suspicion. What began as a desperate plea for reassurance quickly turned into a storm of accusations. Eleanor tried to defuse the situation, but her words only fueled his anger. Each attempt at explanation sounded like an excuse, each gesture like a dismissal. To Arjun, it felt as if she was confirming his worst fears, that he had been nothing more than a distraction, a passing indulgence she could discard when it no longer suited her. The intensity of his emotions boiled over, a mix of love, betrayal, and despair colliding in his mind until reason slipped away. The argument spiraled out of control. In a moment of uncontrollable rage, Arjun lashed out. The act itself was swift yet devastating, ending Eleanor's life within the very walls where they had once shared stolen tenderness. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Arjun's ragged breaths and the distant hum of the estate's machines. When reality set in, he was overcome not with relief, but with horror. The woman who had given him hope, who had once made him feel seen, now lay lifeless because of him. The mansion, once a place of secrecy and desire, had become a crime scene. Arjun, the silent guardian who had crossed into forbidden love, had transformed into her killer in one irreversible moment. The morning after Eleanor's death, the mansion was thrown into chaos. Household staff discovered her body in the lavish study, the room still carrying the faint scent of her perfume. Panic rippled through the estate as calls were made to the police, and soon the quiet Beverly Hills neighborhood was swarming with detectives, forensic teams, and flashing lights. The shocking news spread quickly. Eleanor Whitmore, one of the wealthiest and most influential women in the city, had been murdered inside her own home. Detectives immediately began piecing together the mystery. Surveillance cameras provided crucial evidence. Hours of footage revealed Arjun lingering near the study on the night of the murder, his movements unusual compared to his normal patrols. Further investigation uncovered text messages exchanged between him and Eleanor, exposing the secret relationship they had tried so hard to hide. To the investigators, it painted a clear picture, a forbidden romance turned violent. Meanwhile, Arjun was nowhere to be found. He had fled the mansion in the early hours, driving aimlessly through the city as fear consumed him. But no matter how far he went, he couldn't escape the weight of what he had done. Authorities tracked him down less than 48 hours later, miles outside Los Angeles, where he had checked into a cheap roadside motel. His arrest was swift and dramatic, ending the short-lived attempt at escape. When questioned, Arjun confessed, but his words were not those of a cold-blooded killer. He spoke of betrayal, heartbreak, and the unbearable feeling of being discarded after giving everything he had. The confession added depth to the story, but it did little to change the outcome. For the detectives, the evidence was undeniable. The man who had once been trusted to protect Eleanor had become the one who ended her life. The trial that followed became one of the most sensational cases Beverly Hills had ever seen. Every detail of the scandal was laid bare in court, turning the once private affair into a public spectacle. Journalists filled the courtroom, scribbling notes as prosecutors painted Arjun as a dangerous man who had exploited his position of trust. They described how his obsession with Eleanor had transformed into deadly rage when faced with rejection. The defense, however, offered a different story, portraying him as a man who had been lured into a world far beyond his own, only to be discarded when he no longer served a purpose. The evidence was overwhelming. The surveillance footage, the messages, and his own confession left little room for doubt. The jury listened to weeks of testimony, including emotional statements from Eleanor's relatives, who spoke of the loss of a woman they described as powerful yet vulnerable. Arjun, sitting in silence throughout the proceedings, seemed to shrink under the weight of his actions. For him, the courtroom was not just a place of judgment, but a stage where the entire world witnessed his downfall. When a verdict was read, the outcome was clear: guilty of murder. Arjun was sentenced to life in prison, a fate that sealed his story forever. For Eleanor's family, the decision brought justice, but could not erase the stain of scandal that clung to her name. Society remembered not only her philanthropy and wealth, but also the forbidden romance that had ended in tragedy. In the years that followed, the story lingered in whispers across Beverly Hills. The mansion remained a symbol of secrets, wealth, and betrayal. Arjun's life behind bars became a stark reminder of how passion, when twisted by anger and despair, can destroy everything in its path.